We're going to start off, we've got a lot to cover today. So we're going to start off with the huge win. On Friday, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals not only reinstated a COVID vaccine mandate case that was thrown out by a lower district court, but they also called into question whether or not the COVID vaccines were actual vaccines, calling all COVID vaccine mandates into question and possibly even opening up legal liability. This is the win I have been waiting for. I have been complaining and complaining that the wins that have been happening throughout the courts have not been on the merits of they should not be forcing us into an actual into this vaccine. They shouldn't be forcing us. We should be allowed to do whatever we want with our bodies. They instead had been winning over the last couple of years on technicality type stuff. It was stuff like, oh, you know what, when you mandated this, it was arbitrary and capricious because you didn't make athletes do it, in the NBA or something. I'm just using it. I don't know if that was, I'm just giving kind of these arbitrary, dumb examples where they said, well, you didn't make everybody do it. And so therefore it couldn't really be, or you were the wrong department. A different department apparently is supposed to be in charge of mandating these vaccines. So it wasn't ever on the, can they actually force us into a vaccine mandate against our will? Can they force these so-called, they didn't stop the spread. Can they still force that on us? So this was the first time an actual court case went through where the justices dealt with the merits of the actual substance that they mandated people have injected into their bodies. So let's go ahead and go over the huge legal victory. This is being reported everywhere, as you could see from the California Globe. They've got huge legal victory. Health Freedom Defense Fund wins appeal against LAUSD. So to break this down, this was the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. They've overturned the lower district court ruling to throw out the vaccine mandate case. The case was Health Freedom Defense Fund, which we've had Leslie Manookian on the show a few times from the Health Freedom Defense Fund, versus the Los Angeles Unified School District. Now, the court had to decide on 2 points. Is this case moot because the policy is no longer in effect? So, why are we even here? There's no policy. And secondly, they had to decide on whether or not Jacobson versus Massachusetts, which was that 1905 law, Supreme Court case that was ruled on back in 1905 about smallpox. And if you remember, that was Jacobson did not want to take this smallpox vaccine. He felt like this was an infringement on his rights. Massachusetts, the government of Massachusetts said, well, we think that you have to take this because we don't want the spread of smallpox. The court ruled against Jacobson and in favor of Massachusetts. He wasn't mandated, however, to take the smallpox vaccine. There was a small fine that was imposed on people who did not want to take the smallpox vaccine. So it still was not like what happened to us during COVID, where if you didn't get the vaccine, you couldn't live your life. Back even in 1905 with smallpox, you still could, you just had to pay a fine. Jacobson was disputing that fine, saying this is just totally against my rights. Anyway, he lost. And that case was used and has been used, if you remember, throughout the pandemic, has been widely used as a justification for mandating COVID vaccines. When people would say, hey, this has never been done before, this is crazy. A lot of the pro-vax mandate people would say, yeah, but we did this in 1905 with smallpox, and that went through the Supreme Court, and the state won. There was the mandate. So the court had to decide on those 2 points, whether or not this case if there was any justification for this case continuing at all, because the Los Angeles Unified School District no longer has a vaccine mandate. So they were arguing, why are we here? There's no mandate. We got rid of it. So this isn't even a court case. And then they secondly had to decide on whether or not the merits that the LA Unified School District used in the lower courts when they said, well, Jacobson versus Massachusetts, so we can too. The court said no to both of those questions. And it was a split ruling. The Ninth Circuit District Court of Appeals has a 3-judge panel. 2 of the appointees voted in favor of the Health Freedom Defense Fund. 1 voted in favor of the Los Angeles Unified School District. It is being pointed out in the media that the 2 who ruled with the Health Freedom Defense Fund were Trump appointees, and the one who sided with the vaccine mandates was a Clinton appointee. But does it matter? Not really sure. Let's go over the actual court case. So this was about 30 some odd pages long. I'm going to summarize it for you. First of all, they said in the ruling that yes, this or no, the case is not moot anymore. There's still validity to having this case being heard by the courts because they said LAUSD's pattern of withdrawing and then reinstating its vaccination policies was enough to keep the case alive. So they said, look, you guys keep going with the vaccine mandate, then taking it away, then implementing it again, then taking it away. So there's probable reason to believe that you might bring it forward again. Plus, there was a lot of statements. They actually went into detail about LAUSD withdrawing the vaccine mandate because of this court case. And so the court saying, well, we don't really trust you now because you're doing it. You just didn't want a negative ruling against you. And so that's why. But you've also stated in meetings that you would reinstate vaccine mandates. So there's a lot of probable reasons to believe that you might do this again. And so, no, this court case is not moot. Yes, it can go forward again. Then they turn to the merits. And this is where it gets interesting. And this is what really appeals to me because finally, they said, quote, we now turn to the merits. The district court held, let me just back up for just a second. What happened was the Health Freedom Defense Fund took LAUSD to the district court. You have to go to the lower courts first, and they lost at the district court. The district court said this is a moot case because LA Unified School District no longer has a vaccine mandate. And they said, and they're allowed to do this because the government can do this because of Jacobsen versus Massachusetts. So I'm sorry, I don't think that was clear earlier when I was mentioning all of that. So what the appellate court was saying was, we actually don't agree with the district court. The case is still alive and well because they could re-implement vaccine mandates. And now let's look at what the district court ruled on when it comes to Jacobsen versus Massachusetts. And the appellate court says, we don't agree with the district court that because of the Massachusetts smallpox vaccine mandate that this somehow applies to this. And this is their reasoning on this, okay? So this is why they're kicking the case back to the district court and saying, try again. This case will go forward. Says, we now turn to the merits. The district court held, applying rational basis review under Jacobsen, that the policy satisfied a legitimate government purpose, but the district court's analysis diverges from Jacobsen. We thus vacate the district court's opinion and remand. So they're saying go back to the district court. They said the district court relied on Jacobsen to hold that the policy was rooted in a legitimate government interest. So, in Massachusetts said, we don't want the spread of smallpox. That's a legitimate government interest to protect the people. And so therefore, that is what the Supreme Court ruled on when they ruled on Jacobsen versus Massachusetts. But the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals says, but Jacobsen does not directly control based on plaintiffs' allegations. In Jacobsen, the Supreme Court balanced an individual's liberty interest in declining an unwanted smallpox vaccine against the state's interest in preventing disease. At that court explained, the principle of vaccination is to prevent the spread of smallpox. Because of this, the court concluded that the state's interest superseded Jacobsen's liberty interest and that the vaccine requirement was constitutional. Okay, so they're saying the state has an interest in preventing the disease and that the principle of vaccination is to prevent the spread, keywords there, of smallpox. And because of that, they said the vaccination mandate was in the state's interest to require people to take it because they wanted to prevent transmission. They said plaintiffs argue, however, so the Health Freedom Defense Fund argues that a traditional vaccine must provide immunity and prevent transmission, meaning that it must prevent the spread of COVID-19. That is what we all think when we think of vaccines. When we think about getting a smallpox vaccine, polio vaccine, measles vaccine, all of these various vaccines, right? We're thinking that they're going to prevent the spread of the actual virus. We think if I get the vaccine, I'm not going to get the virus. Not only am I not going to get it, but then because I don't have it, I'm not going to spread it, right? That's a traditional vaccine. That's what we all believe to be, or we've agreed upon for many years of what the definition of vaccine is. So they said plaintiffs allege that the vaccine does not effectively prevent spread, but only mitigates symptoms for the recipient. And plaintiffs claim that something that only does the latter, but not the former, is like a medical treatment not a traditional vaccine. Yeah, that's a medical treatment. That's a treatment to, what they're trying to claim now with the vaccine is that it will prevent you from getting too terribly sick from COVID. That if you get the vaccine, it will lessen the symptoms. That's a therapeutic for you. That's a medical treatment for you individually. That's not a vaccine that prevents spread, right? Says this interpretation distinguishes Jacobsen and thus presenting a different government interest. That's a different government interest in trying to prevent the spread. Saying, well, okay, maybe it doesn't prevent the spread, but what it does is prevent you from overwhelming the hospitals. That's a different government interest. And so the court then says, putting that aside, the district court held that even if it is true that the vaccine does not prevent the spread, Jacobsen still dictates that the vaccine mandate challenged here is subject to and survives the rational basis test. The district court reasoned that Jacobsen does not require that a vaccine have the specific purpose of preventing disease. That's what the lower district court tried to assert, that, well, that wasn't really an integral part of the Jacobsen versus Massachusetts case, that preventing the spread of smallpox wasn't their reasoning. Well, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals doesn't agree with that and says, man, actually, that was their reasoning. It says it acknowledged plaintiffs' allegations that the vaccine did not prevent transmission or contraction of COVID-19, but it declared that these features of the vaccine further the purpose of protecting LAUSD students and employees from COVID-19, and thus the policy survives the rational basis review. And then the court says, no, this misapplies Jacobsen. Jacobsen held that mandatory vaccinations were rationally related to, quote, preventing the spread of smallpox. It says that Jacobsen, however, did not involve a claim in which the compelled vaccine was, quote, designed to reduce symptoms in the affected vaccine recipient rather than to prevent transmission and infection. The district court thus erred in holding that Jacobsen extends beyond its public health rationale, government's power to mandate prophylactic measures aimed at preventing the recipient from spreading the disease to others, to also govern forced medical treatment for the recipient's benefit. Right. So they're saying Jacobsen versus Massachusetts did not at all address forced medical treatment for your benefit. We're going to make you take this treatment because it's going to help you. That is not why they ruled on that case. They ruled on that case very specifically to prevent the spread to other people, which was in the government's interest to protect the population, not to, well, we think that, because then they could mandate you do anything and everything for your health if that's the case. Thank God that the courts ruled like that. I mean, this is like the first real genuine win on the merits of this thing. Goes on to say, because of this, Jacobsen does not apply. LAUSD cannot get around this standard by stating that plaintiffs' allegations are wrong, nor can LAUSD do so by providing facts that do not contradict the plaintiffs' allegations. So they tried to argue, they basically said in the lower district court, they said, well, you're wrong. The plaintiff said, it doesn't stop the spread, which we all know. And the LAUSD said, you're wrong. And then rather than actually counter with a fact of why they're wrong, they actually presented evidence that had nothing to do with them being wrong. It was just like a completely different set of evidence. They said, it is true that we need not accept as true allegations that contradict matters properly subject to judicial notice. They said, but even if the materials offered by LAUSD are subject to judicial notice, they do not support rejecting plaintiffs' allegations. LAUSD only provided, so what they gave was a CDC publication that says COVID-19 vaccines are safe and effective. So that's all so when the plaintiff said it doesn't stop the spread, LAUSD said, you're wrong. Here's the CDC saying COVID-19 vaccines are safe and effective. And the Ninth District Court of Appeals is saying, okay, what does that have to do with stopping the spread? The district court somehow bought that for some dumb reason. But here we are at the appellate court, and we're not going to buy this because that's not an actual counter to the questioning of whether or not the vaccine, the assertion that the vaccine does not stop the spread. You'd have to come back with some hard evidence that the vaccine does stop the spread. And instead of coming back with, well, they're safe and effective. They said, but safe and effective for what? this is what they actually wrote that in there, but safe and effective for what? LAUSD implies that it is for preventing transmission of COVID-19, but does not adduce judicially noticeable facts that prove this. They couldn't prove it. We note the preliminary nature of our holding. We do not. So this is where they say, look, this is just a preliminary. So I have to take back. It's a huge win, but I guess it's like not as big of a win as it could be. Okay. They're saying, look, we're what we're saying is you haven't proven your case, LAUSD. You'd never proved that these vaccines actually stop, that actually they prevent transmission. Of course, they're not going to be able to prove that because they don't, and we all know that they don't. So they won't be able to prove that. And they're saying to them, you didn't prove it. So therefore, this case, you didn't prove it. And the lower district court said that the reasoning for their ruling of throwing this case out was because the vaccines, because of Jacobsen versus Massachusetts, which said vaccines need to stop the spread. It's just this, you weren't able to prove that they stopped the spread. So now what? So they're saying, look, this is just preliminary. And they said that they're not asserting that the plaintiff's allegations that the COVID vaccine does not stop the spread. They're not saying as justices that this is fact, this is true. What they're saying is it's plausible. And of course it's plausible. They know it's true, right? But they can't rule on that because that's not what this particular case in front of them needed to prove. The plaintiffs didn't need to prove that the vaccines don't stop the spread. They just need to plausibly show the justices that they don't stop the spread so that the justices would kick the case back. And they said, yeah, they did that because they know they don't stop the spread. So they're like, yeah, okay, they plausibly proved that they don't stop the spread. And LAUSD did not plausibly prove that they stop the spread of the virus. So they said, therefore, Jacobsen does not apply, and so we vacate the district court's order of dismissal and remand. So they're sending the case back. So now what gets to happen is the Health Freedom Defense Fund can go back again and try to go after LAUSD again. Now, my guess is LAUSD will not. Now, it's going to be tricky. It's going to be tricky for them. They're not going to want to use the same arguments that the appellate court just told them to, kick off with, go kick rocks. Like this is not a real argument. So they're not going to try that again, but they almost have to, because what else do they have? I mean, the only reasoning they have for mandating vaccines is Jacobsen versus Massachusetts. And that is not going to hold in another district court when the appellate court says that doesn't hold. You have to prove. So it would be incumbent now upon LA Unified School District to prove that the vaccines stop the spread. Good luck to them. That's what they would have to prove at this point going forward, unless they come up with an entirely different creative reason as to why they mandated the vaccines. But this is a turning point. So even though this case didn't mean necessarily that LAUSD lost, I mean, there's a chance that LAUSD does not take this back to that they give up, and that they say, okay, we won't ever, we're not going to mandate any more COVID vaccines, and then that would maybe cause them to pause on any future supposed vaccines, therapeutics for any future ailments. It might cause them pause on that. But I hope this goes back. I hope that they do try. I hope that they're that arrogant to try to prove that they stop the spread. And I hope that then Health Freedom Defense Fund is able to say, well, I mean, here's all the evidence that it doesn't stop the spread. And being safe and effective is not a reason to mandate a drug onto people. There's plenty of drugs that are safe and effective. We don't mandate people take them. We don't mandate that you take, ibuprofen every time you have a muscle ache because it's safe and effective. We don't mandate a lot of things to people. It's up to you. You don't have to take cough syrup because it's safe and effective. It's your choice. There's plenty of other options and treatments that are safe and effective. So that is not a reason to mandate things onto people. I'm hoping that this goes back to the courts, and that is what they continue to rule on, is finally the actual merits of the vaccine mandates that many of us have been saying, what in the world? How can you possibly be mandating this onto people when it doesn't stop the spread? And there's all of this, mounting evidence of that, and mounting evidence of them, even with the Cleveland Clinic, for example, when the more vaccinated a person was, the more likely they were to get COVID. So this is just it's a wonderful court case that's finally the merits are actually being addressed for the first time. Really happy to see this, and absolutely wishing the best for this case, hoping that this is just such a great win. And I'm hoping that more will follow suit. I mean, once we get one through, then there will be many others that follow that will have a similar ruling. And then that would actually set the precedent that you must have in order for it to be called a vaccine, it needs to actually prevent transmission. You can't just call something a vaccine if it's a therapeutic to mitigate your symptoms in the event that you maybe get the disease. That's not what we believe, that what we've agreed upon in our vernacular to what a vaccine is, right? So it's important that we get that definition down, so that in the future, if they ever try this again, there's actually an agreed upon definition to that. So great win. Happy to see it. Happy to see this very much. And we'll keep you guys posted on any more like this, this case and any more like this. Thank you for watching this clip from the full Kim Iversen show, which you could catch just by heading to that link down below, KimIversonShow.com. You can watch the full show from what you just watched, or you could catch the full show live Monday through Friday, live streams, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern at KimIversonShow.com. See you then. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Never miss an episode. Never miss a clip. Never miss a segment. Thanks, guys.